my name is Abdul Malak. I go to the American Community School at Beirut. I'm currently a rising junior in the Teen Global Connect program. My presentation today is going to be about an often unrecognized Arab figure, the Prince of Physicians. Now, I'm not an expert, but I promise that I try to learn and satisfy myself as much as I could about this topic. Now, if someone here knows more about this topic than me, please correct me and contribute, ask questions, but do it nicely. And lastly, I'm not trying to persuade you of any agenda, just hoping that my presentation helps you cultivate your own curiosities. Now, I'm going to start by giving you a bit of background on Ibn Sina, and secondly, take you into a bit of his contributes and influence in his time, and lastly, tell you a bit about the question I was exploring in relation to Ibn Sina. So, why am I curious about this topic? I'm very curious in these three subjects of medicine, psychology, and history. And recently, I was in a conversation with my mom after joining this program and telling her, I was asking her a medically related question, even though she does nothing to do with the field. But, and I realized that there's many Arab figures that have many influences and contributions and aren't spoken about enough. You know, they're very much overlooked. So I took liberty in researching, and Ibn Sina really stood out to me. So yeah, and I'm here today to present a bit about him. Okay, so what role did poetry play for Ibn Sina is the main question I'm going to be exploring. I had when researching, it came up and I just dove in deeper and found it really interesting. I hope you guys will too. Abu Ali al-Hussein ibn Sina, also known as Ibn Sina in the West, was a prominent Muslim physician and philosopher of his time, who's probably the most significant philosopher in the Arab world. Now, he was born in 1980 Afshana near Bukhara, which is in the present country of Uzbekistan. Having memorized the Quran by age 10, as well as extensive education in Persian and Arabic poetry, Ibn Sina went on to master the principles of physics and medicine, and even metaphysics. He soon outgrew the education he was receiving at home and from his teachers and took charge of his own self-education. In the following 6 years, he devoted his time to studying Islamic law, jurisprudence, philosophy, logic, and even natural sciences. By the age of 13, he started studying the medical sciences. Now, by the age of 16, he turned to medicine, a discipline over which he claimed easy mastery. And at 18, he was a well-established physician, and his reputation became well known throughout his country and beyond. Now, this quote was actually when Ibn Sina was 18, and right after he excelled at being a physician, he was on record for saying how medicine is no hard and thorny science like mathematics and metaphysics. So I soon made great progress. I became an excellent physician and began to treat patients using approved remedies. This quote shows how fast Ibn Sina picked up on stuff and how he was able to go to great lengths at such a young age. Now, a bit about his journey and his timeline. When the Sultan of Bukhara became very sick, seriously ill from an unknown but dangerous illness, Ibn Sina was summoned to treat him at the time when even the trained court physicians were unable to master the feat. After the recovery of the Sultan, the royal library was awarded to Ibn Sina, and he was given access to rare manuscripts and unique books, which added much more to his knowledge. Now, after the Sultan's death, Ibn Sina moved to Jurjan, near the Caspian Sea. He there lectured on astronomy and logic and wrote the first part of his famous book, Al-Qanun fi Tibb, better known in the West as the Canon of Medicine, his most significant medical work. He later moved to Al-Ray, near modern Iran, and had a medical practice there. He authored about 30 of his works during his stay there. Then he moved to Hamdan, where he cured its ruler, Amir Shams ad-Dawla, from the Buwayhid dynasty from severe pain. He became the Emir's private physician and confidant and was later appointed as the Grand Vizier, which was basically the prime minister. Now, when Shams ad-Dawla died, Ibn Sina wrote to the ruler of Isfahan for a position in his court. And when the Emir of Hamadan became aware of this, he imprisoned Ibn Sina. Now, weirdly, prison had a sort of benefit to Ibn Sina as it led him to writing several books. And after his release, he went to Isfahan, which is in blue. And he spent his final years serving its ruler, Amir al-Dawla, and later died in 1037 AD at the age of 57. So here on the right, you can see his journey. I talked about the most prominent points in his journey in Jurjan and Al-Ray and Hamadan, but you can see in blue how he started out in Bukhara and later died in Isfahan. I prefer a short life with width to a narrow one with length. This is one of the most famous quotes said by Ibn Sina. Ironically, Ibn Sina did live a short, fairly life, but it was definitely not narrow. And this is shown in the variety of subjects he contributed, including mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and physics. Now, Ibn Sina wrote about 450 works in his lifetime, only of which 240 have survived to this day. Now, out of the surviving works, 150 are on philosophy and 40 are devoted to medicine, which were the two fields he contributed to the most. His remaining works were on a variety of subjects, including psychology, geology, mathematics, astronomy, and even logic. Taking that into account, he was noteworthy for these works, which are Al-Qanun fi Tib, which is also known as the Canon of Medicine, Kitab al-Shifa, the Book of Healing, and Al-Urjusa fi Tib, his medical poem, which I'll be talking about throughout this presentation. Now, to this day, Ibn Sina's medical legacy could be found in the numerous physician societies and medical schools named for him, as well as the prizes for researchers and practitioners. In 1980, there was this medal awarded in his name and by the UNESCO, which they again made another prize for him in ethics and science in 2002, honoring him, which is awarded every 2 years. And here, this is something found interesting, how they put Ibn Sina on the Polish stamp as well as on the Libyan stamp. This really shows how much influence he had in his time up to this day. So what role did poetry play for Ibn Sina? Okay, so first and foremost, I'm gonna just be introducing again Al-Urjusa fi Tib, the medical poem. This is the first and last page you can see on your right-hand side. This was actually a summary of one of the most famous works of his, the Canon of Medicine. And it's a versified. These are all his works, or most of his works were versified, which really stood out to me because why would he write it in a poem? You know, I wanted to learn more, like, was there any benefits to this, any research behind this? So that's mainly what I explored throughout. So, firstly, a didactic poem is intended to serve a scientific and didactic purpose. And because of the lack of the imagination factor in that area, it's called a verse rather than a poem. The name Urjusa is given to an Arabic didactic poems that indicate two characteristic features. Firstly, poems in that genre are typically written in the Rajaz meter, whose syllabic repetitions make a sort of jingling sound that's particularly easy to remember. Second, in contrast to ordinary poems, the rhyme in the first verse of an Urjusa is not repeated in the subsequent lines of the poem. However, there is a consistent rhyming between the two hemistiches in each line. A hemistich is basically half of a line of verse. So an example is shown in this verse on your left-hand side from Ibn Sina's poem. We can see the words marad and hard rhyme. Now, Ibn Sina himself was a talented and prolific poet, one could say, but he composed several and other urjusas regarding anatomy, health preservation, and throughout the four seasons. Yet, this poem remains the longest and most celebrated out of them all. Now, exploring a bit of the psychological aspect, history research shows that many physicians experienced in medical sciences are also talented in art, literature, and poetry. Now, Ibn Sina was a sage who was skilled in poetry in addition to philosophy and medicine. He wrote two types of poetry, those meant to be enjoyed for their literary qualities of novelty and imagination, and his didactic ajusah. Didactic poetry Didactic poems are different from poetry evoked by imagination and feeling. In didactic poetry, the poets want to learn science and philosophy, whether spiritual, ethical, or practical, to the readers. Rhyme and poetry were often used in scientific writing throughout Ibn Sina's era, although he wasn't the first one to use it. They were considered a method for easing memorization and scientific information, and additionally raising students' interests while studying difficult scientific concepts. In medieval Persia, which was where Ibn Sina was mainly in, students of medicine had learned the basics of philosophy before starting medical courses. Poetry could help the students Poetry could help the students memorize the poem itself in combination with its meaning in a way which was better and easier than prose. As seen from the contents of the poem and scholars after reading it, and the way it was classified, it's obvious that Ibn Sina did manage to abridge the principles of the medical theory and medical practices of his time in a simple but elegant poetic style, particularly helpful as a medium for medical education. He was known as the father of modern medicine. Ibn Sina's medical poem influenced the spreading of popularity of composing didactic poems and utilizing them in medical education to this day. In the Islamic world, several of these medical poems written after Ibn Sina still exist, but only in the form of unedited manuscripts. Thank you. And these are sources where if anyone wants to explore more, I definitely recommend.